One of the biggest differences between Disney's new DuckTales series and the original 1987 cartoon has been its focus on character. Yes, it's a show about adventure, mystery, rewriting history, and all of that. But it's also made a point of spending a little bit of each season giving these beloved characters more depth than they've ever had. Specifically, each season so far has had a focused backstory on each triplet. Season 1 for Dewey, Season 2 for Louie, and now Season 3 for Huey. And that's been great, but a lot of fans have pointed out that Huey's story seems to be a slower burn than the character development his brothers had. This episode catches Huey up a little, putting aside the surface elements of his personality that he's been struggling with, and asking the deep questions, like, what does it mean to have inner strength? Let's find out. This is the Split Sword of Swanstantine. One of the best things about DuckTales Season 3 has been the notable uptick in globe-trotting, treasure-hunting adventures. And this episode is another quest for one of the missing mysteries of Isabella Finch's journal. Huey sums up this mission pretty succinctly.
The Split Sword of Swanstantine.
Swanstantine the Great was a warrior king. The king ordered the sword be divided into 3 pieces and hidden within the very city he founded centuries ago.
This time it isn't just the Duck family either, as explained by my favorite joke in the episode.
And what are you two doing here?
We were sleeping over and you said, everyone in the plane. So we got in the plane.
Well, do you like history?
It is my life.
It's a bigger team than normal, but that's okay. For this story, Scrooge and the family will have to split into 3 groups to find the missing parts of a magical sword. And the episode wastes no time kicking the adventure into high gear, with Uncle Scrooge finding an agent of foul almost immediately.
Nice try, Heron! Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. You look like this vile villain I know.
Like I said, almost immediately. It's a fast setup, and it leaves the kids to scour the city for the lost sword as Scrooge holds off Black Heron. And then something really interesting happens. The story slows down and shows us each of the kids' adventures one at a time. That might not sound odd, but it's a little unique. Most episodes of DuckTales either follows just one story all the way through with the same characters, or it cuts back and forth between multiple storylines simultaneously, eventually bringing them together into one unified conclusion by the end of the episode. Instead, this story shows us just one part of the adventure at a time without cutting away to show us what the other characters are doing. It feels a little weird at first, but it's kind of great. The result is a story that lets us spend a little bit more time with each set of characters individually, giving each duo of kids more time to play off each other. That change of pace is pretty interesting on its own. But this story goes to the next level by pairing each of the kids off with someone you don't usually see them with, giving them a chance to explore each other's characters and friendships in unexpected ways. Sure, we already know Webby and Lena's relationship, but what about Huey and Lena? It's a great start for new avenues of character development, but it doesn't just throw you into a new relationship we haven't seen before. First, it gives us a short adventure with Webby and Dewey. That's familiar territory. We already know a lot about these characters and how they interact together, so it's a safe place to try out this new format. They're after the sword hilt, but they get blinded by Ganger D early in their pursuit. This leaves them with the task of climbing a huge tower without being able to see.
Without our sight, we'll have to use our other senses. Hearing, touch.
Dewey's tasting his way to the top.
Dewey, as always, boldly charges ahead, as Webby spends most of the segment trying to figure out which of her many skills is her inner strength.
Find another platform, scan your knowledge of Middle Eastern architecture. Oh, maybe I can echolocate using sound waves like a bat. Scream!
But Webby, she's overthinking it, and that's something that becomes immediately clear to her when Dewey's in danger, and she throws all of her skills and planning and caution to the wind to take a leap of faith to save her friend.
We totally do Webbing it.
Aw, it looks like our true inner strength was our friendship.
And, okay, that's not the strongest lesson, but Dewey and Webby's part of the story isn't here to develop their friendship or their characters, or give us some big revelation. They're the familiar pairing here to ease the audience into the rest of the episode, where we get to see characters who don't normally interact working together. Characters who don't normally work together, like Louie and Violet. Or at least the alias Louie is giving the gangsters of this town to get into the seedy underworld.
The silver-tongued serpent, and this is my colleague, the notorious Violent Saber. We're here to speak to the Spice Baron. Just a little alias I've been developing.
As usual, Louie is in this for the scam, but that's absolutely not Violet style. She lives in a world of research, facts, study, and, truth and reality. But she goes along with Louie's elaborate plan of leaning into a fabricated backstory, a false criminal reputation, to get to the sword's hilt and to get it from the town's criminal underground. Unfortunately, they run into a real criminal they know.
Silver-tongued what? He's a mere child, a drooling, blabbering buttercup. And I'm me, the heir apparent of the Rocker Duck fortune.
And when the two of them are challenged to a spice-off, Louie finds himself trapped. He has to live up to the myth he built up about himself, and he's not prepared to do that. At first, it seems like Violet's talents will make up for his lack of foresight, but that's not actually the lesson here. As Rocker Duck reveals who they really are, Violet and Louie find out that the truth of their exploits is just as notorious as the fiction Louie invented to get into the underworld in the first place, earning them the respect of the criminal factions and the sword hilt itself.
Looks like our true strength was just the truth.
That might be an obvious lesson, but I think it works. And I like that it works because Louie, while ambitious and cunning and deceptive, isn't all that egotistical. I mean, yeah, Louie Duck is confident, but he still felt that he had to fabricate an impressive backstory to create a reputation. It's kind of innocent almost that he doesn't realize that the adventures he's been on with his family are incredibly impressive in their own right.
You're the Louie Duck?
The very Louie Duck who vanquished the Bombi, overthrew the Pharaoh Tothra, and crushed Scrooge McDuck's greatest enemies with a single pen stroke!
Our last pairing is perhaps the two characters you'd least expect to see together. Huey and Lena. And this segment is interesting because, in a lot of ways, it's the most straightforward and simple, but also the most important. Lena and Huey need to retrieve the blade of the sword, but when they find it, hiding in plain sight on the ground, Steelbeak shows up to swipe it from them. But Lena freezes time, allowing the two kids to pause for a moment in a shared mindscape and formulate a plan. Lena figured they were just taking this breather to find the best moment to take Steelbeak down and punch him. But Huey sees it differently. This is an opportunity to meticulously explore every option.
We need strategy, the perfect plan. We could run infinite simulations. Let's do this!
Yeah, that doesn't work. And after countless attempts to find a way to outwit Steelbeak, Huey has to admit that it's a problem he can't think his way out of. Even if he has unlimited time, he can't figure this out just through being clever. He's out of ideas. Until Lena notices a door behind him.
What is the Duke of making a mess?
Nothing! No, don't open it!
So far, each season of DuckTales has had that side story, developing one of the triplets. The first season had a strong focus on Dewey, the second on Louie. But throughout the third season of the show, Huey's character development has almost felt like it's taken a back seat. Today we find out one of the reasons why. Because the oldest triplet has been bottling up most of his emotions and striving to be as cool, logical, and responsible as possible.
The Duke of making a mess is the part of me that is pure emotion. Gets in the way of my thinking and is against everything I stand for.
You can't ignore the parts of yourself you don't like, even the parts you're afraid of. You gotta own them.
Lena can see what's going on, and while it's totally understandable why Huey would be hiding away his anger and his frustration and trying to keep control of himself, she helps him see that bottling it all up is just as unhealthy as letting it overtake your better judgment. Balance is important. Plus, the Duke of making a mess could be the perfect solution to their Steelbeak problem. And so, after a very fast psychic therapy session, Huey decides to accept the part of himself he's been hiding away. And what's unleashed is a personality that looks extremely familiar. This scene delivers on an idea that DuckTales fans have been talking about for a while. Not just that Huey has been bottling up his frustration and anger throughout the series, and that it was about to explode at some point, but that of the three triplets, Huey is actually the most like their Uncle Donald. If you think about it, it actually works. Like the DuckTales version of Donald Duck, Huey likes things to be orderly and safe. But behind that, deep down, he's also passionate and extremely emotional. Huey's been much better at hiding that side of himself than his uncle, who's just always ready to explode. But when Huey reaches that breaking point, he also snaps in a frenzy and fury that's just perfectly Donald and the perfect way to symbolize this connection between the two characters. And when Huey accepts that part of himself, the aggression fades into a more controlled chaos, allowing him to defeat Steelbeak in just a ballet of fury.
That was the most beautiful butt kicking I've ever seen.
It's a big step forward for Huey's development as a character. But I don't think this season is done with him yet, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else we learn about him. Either way, after defeating Steelbeak, Scrooge and Black Heron's fight comes back around, and all four groups come together to complete the sword. But Fowl's agents also team up and demand the artifact. And Scrooge gives it to them. Not because they outnumber the Duck Clan, or that they're more powerful, but simply because Uncle Scrooge knows how this will play out. This is a magic artifact, and it has its own set of rules, and it only grants its powers to those who used their inner strength to obtain it.
The split sword could only be claimed by those possessed of inner strength. Heron's all surface. You used your inner strength, and you kids are mine.
It's a quick, satisfying conclusion that ties into the larger theme of this episode. To have inner strength, you have to be true to yourself. Webby and Dewey's inner truth was their friendship. Violet and Louie's was realizing that there's more strength in truth than in a lie. Lena and Huey's revelation is the most clear yet, that you can't hide who you are and truly draw on your inner strength. It's a good but short lesson, one that draws on the idea of personal honesty. But if that's the key to wielding the sword, you might wonder, why didn't it work for Fowl, who seems to be completely open and honest about who they are, evil or otherwise? Well, I think there's a reason for that. Their truth is that they didn't come here for the sword. They came for something else.
Mr. Director, mission accomplished. We got what we came here for.
In the end, it seems that Fowl was after one of Scrooge McDuck's feathers, but it's unclear what they need it for. There are plenty of options. They could be working on a clone of Scrooge McDuck, or Magica could need it for a component for a spell if she was convinced to work with Fowl. It could be used as some kind of DNA identifier to get into the money bin. We don't know yet, but I think it's going to be pretty exciting to find out how that ties into the season finale. All in all, this was a fun story with an interesting structure. But on top of all that, I found one more thing interesting. That Fowl has a very specific way of fighting Scrooge. And so far, he's failed to catch it every time. In the Impossibin, Fowl used the attack on the money bin as a distraction to execute their real plan, stealing the missing mysteries the Duck family had been finding throughout the season. In this episode, they used the exact same play, but sort of in reverse, using a missing mystery to distract Scrooge from their real target, one of his feathers. Clearly, Scrooge isn't seeing all the angles in these attacks, which makes me excited to see how Louie, Della, or one of the other characters helps him see the angles he's missing later in the season. That's it for this quick review, which came out a bit later than I hoped. The end of 2020 has been incredibly busy for me, so please bear with me as I catch up with the next few episodes of this show. Either way though, thank you for sticking around, watching these videos, subscribing, and all of that. This community has been a genuine joy in an otherwise chaotic year. So thanks for watching, sharing, and chatting. I really mean it. Until next time though, take it easy, Internet.